Hello and welcome to Retro Reviews, my channel where I review my favorite retro video games of all time, as well as some modern releases I have recently finished. Today I want to talk about a retro video game that is incredibly close to my heart, one that I have like memories from when I was a child, watching my brother play and then playing for myself and playing so many times since, and that is Conker's Bad Fur Day for the Nintendo 64. Now, first and foremost, I am reviewing Conker's Bad Fur Day, not Conker Live and Reloaded. I have played through Live and Reloaded. I have an original Xbox. It's the only Xbox console I own, and it was because I found a copy of Live and Reloaded for super, super cheap on a buy-sell trade at one point. So I have played through Live and Reloaded. I enjoyed it. I don't think it's nearly as good as the original. Let's get that out of the way right away. I think the visuals are stunning, but I don't like the dull colors. The color palette I think is much less appealing or interesting. I don't think the combat is nearly as fun. They swap out things like the basic frying pan attack for a baseball bat at some point that gives you like more enemies to fight in the overworld. I just didn't enjoy it nearly as much. I have heard the Xbox Live component of it and the multiplayer was fantastic, but I also love the original's multiplayer because they're two very different things. Overall, I think Live and Reloaded was good, probably great, because it still holds everything that I love about Conker, but I think it's an inferior product overall. So let's get into why I love Conker's Bad Fur Day so much. Now this is Rare at its absolute pinnacle at this point. Rare has been releasing games for the Nintendo 64 like clockwork year after year. They have the likes of Banjo-Kazooie, Donkey Kong 64, Banjo-Tooie, Diddy Kong Racing, GoldenEye, and Perfect Dark. And this game was slated to be one of Nintendo 64's last games, essentially, one of the last first party at least, assuming that Rare is a first party, I guess second party games, one closely working with Nintendo. And when it was originally revealed, the idea behind it, there was a little tech demo showed, and it was originally called Conker and the 12 Tales. And when it was debuted, it got a lot of backlash for being just another Banjo-Kazooie Donkey Kong 64-like game. It was everything that people had seen before. It looked really cutesy and charming, but a little bland comparatively speaking. They're kind of sick of these mascot platformers. It's just a brand new one that probably does things similar to Banjo or DK64. So Rare took a bit of umbrage with that, and they said, okay, you think this is going to be the same thing? Well, we'll show you. And completely overhauled Conker's Bad Fur Day and turned it into something unrecognizable. Now, the opening sequence tells you everything you need to know about this game. It shows the Nintendo 64 logo in a room with a swinging light, and all of a sudden it shrieks, and you hear a chainsaw revving, and Conker saws it in half and pulls a Rare logo out and puts it up there. You can tell this is not going to be a kid's game right away. And you can tell from the box art as well. This game was so linked to Rare. It's so heavily linked to Rare and did have a cutesy mascot as the title character that they actually had to brand it so clearly that this was a game made for adults and not for kids. It had the M rating on there. It said only for adults, not for children. Had Conker holding a stein of beer and Barry in this really scantily clad outfit, posing very provocatively. This was clearly meant to be aimed at adults and not children. And the end result is hilarious to see how far it's come from its original inception. Now, this was spearheaded by Chris Seaver. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. He's one of my favorites in the entire game industry just for this experience alone. He not only was the lead writer and designer and everything, he also voice acted probably 95% of the cast. The female characters and I should say like one or two of the female characters and one of the singing bosses that you fight in the game are voiced by somebody else. But pretty much everybody else is voiced by this one guy. He really took the creative direction and just ran with it, and he went so hard on this game. Now it starts off as Conker, who is drinking with his buddies, and he calls home to his girlfriend Barry, who is exercising and doesn't come to the phone. And he tries to weasel out of not being home on time. He says, I'm out drinking with these guys, and we're gonna, he tries to kind of explain away what he's doing, and he gets way too drunk with his friends, and he ends up leaving this tavern that he was at, and kind of vanishes into the night for a while. He kind of wakes up the next morning really hungover in a field that he's never seen. He has no idea where he is, and that's the start of the game. Meanwhile, a B plot is going on with the king of the land, the King Panther, who has the funniest problem probably in all of gaming. It's absolutely hilarious that this is the drive for the antagonist of the game. He is sitting on his throne, he's got a glass of milk, and he sets it down on his table. And hilariously, the table has a giant missing leg on the table. There's 3 legs and one missing, and it capsizes and the glass shatters, and he gets pissed. And as you get little glimpses into this, you'll get little cutscenes as you progress throughout the game. You'll see that he doesn't know what's wrong with the table, and no one else can seem to tell him what's wrong either. It's absolutely hysterical. He gets this his lead scientist that comes out. He's analyzing it. He doesn't seem to know either. He does all sorts of tests and experiments. Finally, comes to the conclusion that the table is missing a leg and it needs a new one. But instead of getting a new leg, talks about all the things he's postulated could go there. Elephants and other animals that just don't quite fit. But then lands on a red squirrel being the best replacement leg for the table. So the antagonist's drive is to fix his end table for his milk glass when he's sitting on his throne, and they're out to get Conker because he's going to fit perfectly in that. Even more hilariously, if you get a game over in this game, there are several different screens you can get that are really funny, and one of them is Conker tied up as the chair leg. I love the amount of detail they put into this absolutely ridiculous plot. It's pretty comical, and it's meant to be. This is a slapstick, gross out humor type game. This is everything that Rare probably wanted to be with games like Banjo-Kazooie, even Donkey Kong 64. There's some fair adult humor in the game, in the dialogue, if you're looking for it, and they just took that and ran with it. And they're like, fine, we've got unfiltered now, we can absolutely do this. What the biggest tragedy about this game is that it was a commercial failure overall. And the reason was pretty simple. This was an M-rated game with a cutesy platformer, a cutesy mascot, with a game series like Banjo-Kazooie and Donkey Kong 64 to compare to. It's this platformer that definitely doesn't feel like it's geared toward a hardcore audience, and it's also on the Nintendo 64, so it feels like the audience was just missing. And couple that with the fact that the GameCube, the PlayStation 2, the Xbox were coming around the corner. This was coming at the very end of the Nintendo 64's life cycle. A lot of people had already moved on, were just finishing the games that they already had, and they were excited about this new generation of consoles that was coming. So Conker came just at the worst time. I feel like if it would have come the generation after, if it had come on the GameCube or originally debuted on the Xbox, it would have been a massive success because of how interesting the idea was. I think Live and Reloaded ultimately failed because it was just trying to remake the original. And again, it was at a weird time. It was when it was trying to ignite this hardcore audience and make it seem like a more gritty game, but it just didn't quite come out as well because there was already the original to compare it to. I think if it had come out on its own, maybe things would have been different. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think it just came out at the worst time possible. I would have loved to see Conker's Bad Fur Day on the GameCube, what that would have been. And I really would have loved to see the sequel that they were cooking up because it sounded really interesting and intriguing. Let's talk about what I love about Conker, why it's my favorite Rare game and my favorite 3D platformer ever. And that's some pretty bold words coming out here, but I love this game so much. The writing, for one, is perfect. It's absolutely hysterical from top to bottom. The characters are really well written. They're really interesting. They're pretty funny and quippy. Half the NPCs that you run into are just filled with curse words coming out the wazoo. One of the funny things that they have, some of the more extreme swear words that they use are bleeped in a lot of ways. So they'll have some dialogue going, and you'll see in the dialogue bubble a little bunch of characters denoting the swear word and a bleeping out. And sometimes those swear words will actually be left in, and sometimes they're bleeped, and you can tell based on context which ones are coming in. And so it's pretty comical what they decided to censor and what they didn't. There's no F words ever let fly in this game. Those ones are always censored, but they are very well implied. And I think pushing the boundaries this far on the Nintendo 64 is absolutely hilarious. The characters that you run into are all whimsical and interesting. You have things like sentient cheese that you have to chase down to feed this rat who's scaring this sentient block that's on another smaller block's back, squishing him. It's just absolutely wild. You have a giant breasted sunflower that you have to help this this bum bee go and pollinate. And then after you do that, you get to bounce on her boobs up to some cash lying on a ledge. This game is crazy in every conceivable way. There's nothing about this game that isn't wacky and wild, and it just works. One of the best mechanics in this game, one of the things I love most about this game, is the use of the B button. If you use it basically after the first opening tutorial section, you get a frying pan attack. It's just pretty basic. It stuns enemies, rarely kills. It's just meant to do a stun and nothing more. However, if you find a big B button on the ground at any point, these are called context-sensitive pads. They are explained to you at the very beginning of the game. These give you what you need in that moment of time, which is a brilliant concept. It makes it so now you can be even more wacky and wild. You come up to the very first B pad that's explained to you, you're hungover, and you are being told by this sentient scarecrow, Birdie, that you need to stand on it, and it's context sensitive. You press the button, and something will happen. You pull out a beer bottle, and you give it to him. He's like, thanks, I really needed that. And he's like, okay, come over to this B button and press that one and see what happens. And you go over there, and you press it, and you create some little tonic, which cures your hangover, and then you're ready to go. And that's when Conker realizes that this is something that's going to give you exactly what you need in that moment of time, which opens up for hilarious results. Early on, you get a B pad that gives you a slingshot to deal with these dung beetles guarding the path that will absolutely wreck you up and down the field if you don't try and deal with them first. Later on, you'll put a stick of dynamite in a giant ball of poo. You'll get courage pills that make you not afraid of the water anymore, so now you can swim underwater. You can get a bazooka. You can get machine guns, like dual submachine guns for your hands. There's no limit to what the B button can and can't do. You can even turn into an anvil at several points. Conker just midair will turn into an anvil and fall, and you have no real explanation why. It's just because he can. This game is absolutely hilarious in every single way. I've probably said that 100 times now at this point, but it is. It's just really funny because of how well they designed this mechanic, this context-sensitive idea. You also deal with death really in a funny way. The first time you die, you're sent to a cutscene where you are greeted with Greg the Grim Reaper, who initially has this deep and scary echoing voice, and turns out he's just this tiny little shrimp dude that's even smaller than Conker, who is speaking through a microphone. He has this nasally, shrivelly voice, and he explains to Conker that squirrels are like cats. They're a special case. They have as many lives as they think they can get away with. So you find these squirrel tails hidden throughout the world, and they give you extra lives. So instead of dying, you'll see a little skeleton hand drop you onto the last checkpoint that you hit, essentially, after you die. It's quite genius. I love how they gave you a whole cutscene to introduce the Grim Reaper character. It's pretty comical. It's exactly what you expect out of a game as witty as Conker's Bad Fur Day. The bosses are also incredibly interesting, as well as the NPCs. Any enemies that you come across are really weird and really match the area that you're going into. So you go into like this poo mountain area, and you've got dung beetles around. Makes sense. You go into another area, and it's very like a big giant hive. You've got murderous hornets or honeybees on the other side of it. You go into another area, and you have catfish swimming in the water, and this giant bull shark that's like just a bulldog over there. The areas really match the theme really, really well. They have the enemies that match the theme, and they have a boss that matches it as well. So in the Pooh Mountain area, you have the Great Mighty Pooh, who's an opera singer singing this hilarious, never topped sequence where he sings about how he's going to throw his crap at Conker. Again, it's just the comedy is gold. It's everything that you would ever want out of a funny game. And the best thing about Conker is that it does have these original sequences like The Great Mighty Pooh, but it also has a lot of parodies. It parodies so many movies of the time. You have things from Jaws to Terminator all the way to The Matrix and Alien that it'll parody, and it does it so well. It's a clear parody, but the way it's implemented is also so well done, you just can't help but enjoy yourself. The fight itself reflects the movie. It's pretty hysterical. I love what they did with the bosses, especially in this game. They make the trek to them and the journey to them so much more enjoyable. This game also ditched collectibles in a big way. The only real collectible that you have in this game is cash. Conker's whole drive is to get rich. He wants to get rich and get babes. That's what he wants. He already has a girlfriend, but he's a little promiscuous at times. He just wants to get babes, get money, and get drunk. That's what he's all about. So the main collectible you'll be getting is money, and it's scattered throughout the world. You will have to collect every bit of money to progress the story. There are certain spots that are barred off that you can't access until you have a certain amount of money. So it's an easy way to make collectibles a non-issue. This is not Banjo-Kazooie. This is not Donkey Kong 64. One collectible. This game is story-driven. A story-driven, M-rated 3D platformer made by Rare. It's hilarious. I can't believe it works, but it works. And as you play this game, the more you'll fall in love with it, with its wacky humor, with this violence, the gross out violence that you'll see, the hilarious boss fights, the mini games you'll encounter. Even when you find something that's a little frustrating or a little dated with its controls, I recently completed it all over again, and I just had a great time. It played just as well as I remembered it. The frustration really isn't there anymore. I've played so many games, I go back to it, and it's pretty easy to control. I'm surprised with how well they polished this game for a game that came out in the early 2000s, especially with the new generation coming around the corner. They had to have a lot of other projects in development for this new generation, but Conker's Bad Fur Day sits at the top of Rare's work for me, and it was their last work on the Nintendo 64. They were bought by Microsoft not too far afterward, and the rest has been history. The franchises they've had have been squandered into oblivion. You see very little use of the studio as of late. Sea of Thieves is pretty much the only thing of note as of late. And it's pretty disappointing to see because Microsoft had the golden goose of gaming, and they knew it, but they really just dropped the ball. And it's a shame because Conker really deserves a sequel. It's a game that has developed a cult following now because of how wacky and charming and how well written it is, how great it plays. It's really earned this reputation of cult classic. I love this game. I've loved it since I was a little kid. I love it now. The more I play it, the more I fall in love with this game. I highly recommend you go and find, if you can find a copy, they're more rare now because they didn't sell a ton. If you can get a 64 copy, even if you can play the live version, Xbox Live version, whatever you can do to play Conker's Bad Fur Day, I highly encourage you to go do it. The best way is probably on the Xbox One with the Rare Replay bundle. That is a collection of all the Rare games that they had access to for Microsoft. Conker's Bad Fur Day, the original, is in there in HD. It's fantastic. That's the only reason for me to ever get an Xbox. So if you haven't played this game, I highly recommend you do, especially if you have an Xbox One just sitting around. I'm sure you can get Rare Replay for pretty cheap nowadays. I love Conker's Bad Fur Day. It's my favorite 3D platformer, the best Rare game ever made. I'm going to give it an easy platinum rank. Thank you all for listening, and I will see you on the next one.